Hello people, I'm the Comic Book Gamer. Today I'm going to be talking about indie comics because I do occasionally get some people asking me about indie comics and what indie comics I read, and I don't really get the chance to talk about indie comics too much, so today I decided I would just list some of my favorite indie comics. Now I'm not going to be getting into too much detail about them because I have a lot of indie comics I'm going to be going over. Also, while G.I. Joe is technically an indie comic and I have a ton of G.I. Joe comics, I'm not going to be talking about that because it's under IDW, so it's indie, but it's G.I. Joe, so it's like it's an established Hasbro brand, so that's why I'm not going to be talking about G.I. Joe or anything like that, but I'm going to be talking about a lot of indie comics. Also, if you're like younger trying to get into indie comics, I'd suggest waiting a bit till you're older because indie comics have a lot of nudity and a lot more cursing and just a lot more darker stuff than the mainstream Marvel and DC. Even though Marvel and DC can get pretty dark, the indie stuff gets even darker. And so if you're younger and you're looking to get into indie comics, there are some you can, but I'd suggest waiting till you're older and just sticking with DC and Marvel for now. But anyways, let's get into it. This is in no particular order, by the way. I'm just listing a bunch of indie comics that I like. I'm not going from best to worst or worst to best or anything like that. So starting off, we've got Cal by Kyle Higgins. Now Kyle, as it says on the cover, stands for Chicago Organized Workers League. It's sort of a more realistic take on superheroes. Think the Minutemen and Watchmen in their prime. It's sort of like that, at least that's what it seems like it's inspired by. It takes place, well, the book opens up in the 60s in Chicago, and it's really interesting. It's a much more realistic take on superheroes in Chicago. There's a lot going on. It's only 2 volumes though, which kind of sucks because I have both volumes, but I was hoping we'd get a 3rd volume, but we haven't gotten it yet, and I don't think we ever will. But nonetheless, it's still good, and 2 volumes is pretty short, so if you're just looking to get into something that's not a long-term commitment for reading, because you've got some stuff like Saga that's been going on so long, or Walking Dead, where it's like, I don't know if I want to get in now because there's so much. But with Cal, there's not that much, so you can get in and just read the 2 volumes. Next up, we've got my favorite, Sweet Tooth, which is written by Jeff Lemire. As you guys know, I'm a big Jeff Lemire fan, and Sweet Tooth is probably my favorite indie book that I've ever read. It's really good. I believe it was IGN who, somewhere they quoted on here saying it was, No, it was USA Today who said Mad Max with antlers, which is kind of what it reminds me of. So you have this kid who's in this post-apocalyptic world. That's him right there on the cover. He's in this post-apocalyptic world where things are going bad, and there's people like him that are hybrids of humans and animals, and a lot of people aren't fans of them and take them and capture them, and they're just in a lot of danger. His parents die, so he's out on his own, and he runs across this Clint Eastwood type guy, and this Clint Eastwood guy and him go on some adventures. And I've only read the first 2 volumes. I need to read the others because it's really good and it's really intriguing, and they just basically go across this apocalyptic world and go through different things, and they're just great characters, great writing. The art is by Jeff Lemire himself, so it takes a bit getting used to it, but it all depends on how you are with it, like if you love it or not, because some people, if they don't like it, I can understand because it's not exactly the greatest stuff, but I think this style fits with this book, and it's just a really good book. The first volume is all a road trip. It's all about going from point A to B, and they have a good dynamic because the kid is really innocent. He hasn't really seen much of the world. His parents are very religious. He believes what he believes, and then the Clint Eastwood type guy is just, he's very rugged and doesn't believe in anything in the world anymore, and they got a good dynamic there, and just, yeah, it's a really good story. I highly recommend it. If you only read 1 book on this list, I'd recommend Sweet Tooth. Again, only if you can get, if you're fine with the art. Next up is Descender, which is another Jeff Lemire book. It's pretty good, but I'd say it is weaker compared to some of his other stuff because most of his other stuff is really good, top notch, but this is still pretty good. I know a lot of people love it. I really like it, but I wouldn't say I quite love it. Jeff Lemire does a great job at world building here, and this book takes place in the far off future. There's a bunch of aliens and different planets and robots are a part of everyday, just part of every day. You see robots wherever. And so what's going on here is you have this planet, well, this sort of like colony of miners that live on this planet that are just like mining it, and suddenly everyone there dies except for this robot and his like robot dog, and that's it. And then there's some other robots, and they don't really know why, but you're trying to figure out why throughout the book. A lot of different things happen. There's lies and deception. People are not who they seem and things like that, and it's a really interesting story, and I thought it was pretty good. Again, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be because I'd heard so much praise and I love Jeff Lemire's work, but it is still pretty good and definitely worth picking up. Especially, that's the great thing about indie comics, is they're, for the most part, really cheap. They are just incredibly cheap compared to just mainstream comics. Next up is Abadan, which is a book that is written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti. They are the creative team behind some of my favorite Jonah Hex books. They wrote Jonah Hex for a long time, just a long time, and I love their work with Jonah Hex. They had a series in the New 52 with Jonah Hex called All-Star Western. It went for a good while, and then it had an ending, and it was really good, but it sucked that it got canceled, and they were like, hey, we're not done writing westerns. We got one more in us at least, so if you guys want to see us do another one, donate to our Kickstarter. And they did a Kickstarter for Abadan, and that was the first and only Kickstarter I've ever donated to because I wanted another book from them. So I pledged to this Kickstarter, whatever you do on Kickstarter, and this book came out. Now you can get it on Amazon now. It's not like, oh, it's Kickstarter exclusive and that's it, and you can't get it anywhere else. It is on Amazon right now, I believe, for like $8 or like $9, but I got it through Kickstarter when it first came out, and I was so excited about it. It's really good. It's a good mystery western if you're a fan of the Old West like I am. Just, I grew up on Clint Eastwood movies, and just, I love the Old West setting. I think it's awesome. I'd love to see more Old West comics and things like that, and just Old West anything. But it opens up with someone getting murdered and the sheriff being called there, and then there's a lot of twists and turns till the end. And it's just a really good mystery book that takes place in the Old West, written by guys that have already conquered the Old West in comics with Jonah Hex, and now they're taking it to an indie book, and it's just really good, and I enjoyed it. And Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti just never disappoint for me. They're a great creative team. They're just really good writers, and I wish they'd come back to Jonah Hex. I wish DC would let them write Jonah Hex again. But anyways, yeah, you should definitely check out Abadan. Most of you guys probably haven't even heard of it unless you've heard me talk about it before, because I have a few times, but not very much. But yeah, definitely read it if you haven't. Again, indie books are cheap, and this book's pretty cheap, so you should definitely go pick it up. Next up, we have Deadly Class by Rick Remender. This book I heard a lot of hype about on Twitter, and I just saw a lot of people talking about it. I was like, oh, it looks cool. And then I finally picked it up and I was reading it. I was like, okay, it's good, but I don't see what all the hype was about. And then it just gets better and better and better as you read it. Because at first, like the first half or so, it's like, it's good, but I don't see why. And then it just escalates so much, and it just gets insanely good. So the main character in this, Marcus, is a homeless guy, and he, through a lot of different things that happen, he meets up with these kids that are assassins, and they recruit him because their master wanted them to recruit him into this school that turns kids into assassins. But Marcus is the only kid that doesn't belong there. All the other kids are just like the sons and daughters of warlords or drug lords, or just big people, just very powerful, important people. But Marcus is just some homeless kid off the street. His parents are dead, and he's got, I won't spoil it here, but he wants to kill someone that's pretty famous. This takes place in the 80s, by the way. It's not modern day. He wants to kill someone from the 80s that's pretty famous, and it's pretty interesting, and I can't wait to see it, because I've only read the first volume, and there's already like 5 or 6 volumes out, I think, so I can't wait to read what happens next. But there's a lot of different stuff in here. There's a cast of characters, things get intense, they already set up a villain, and just, yeah, I can't wait to see what happens next. I need to pick up the rest. It's really, really good. I'd say, though, my favorite character isn't even the main character. My favorite character is Willie, because he's the only normal character in this book. I mean, he's got a very tragic past, but he's the only actual sort of normal character in this. Everyone else is kind of nuts in one way or another, but Willie seems like a normal guy. But yeah, definitely you need to read Deadly Class. It's fantastic. On to Five Ghosts, which is really good. I believe it's ended already. I only have the first 2 volumes, but from the first 2 volumes, I really enjoy it. It's a fun adventure book. It's sort of like Indiana Jones, because it's this guy going on all these different sort of treasure hunts, and he's got the powers of, I'd say it's akin to Vixen from DC. You know how she's got like the necklace and everything, and she can turn into, she can get like the powers of different animals, like the strength of an elephant, the speed of a cheetah, things like that. He's sort of got that, except with these ghosts that are inside him. He's got the powers of an archer, a wizard, a detective, a samurai, and a vampire, and he can channel each one of those. And so it's a really interesting concept. It's this guy going on these Indiana Jones like adventures with different people in the cast of characters they runs into, and he's got these different powers, and it's just a really cool concept, and I liked it and I enjoyed it. It's pretty fun, and I definitely need to pick up the rest. Now on to Witches. This book is written by Scott Snyder, and the art is done by Jock, and the art fits it perfectly. And also, this is the same creative team that made my favorite Batman book, which is Batman the Black Mirror, and they made Witches, which is the scariest comic book I've ever read. It's really eerie and creepy, and I think I heard something about them maybe making a sequel to this, because this was like a one and done book, but then I believe they're talking about maybe making a sequel. But you're best going into this blind. It's about a family, a father, a mother, and a daughter, and there's just a lot of creepy stuff that happens to it in it. Again, I don't want to spoil anything. It's really good. I made a video about it a long time ago, which if you want to check that out, you can. I'll try to have it linked in the description, where I talked about pretty much everything that happens in it. It's really good, but I would suggest reading the comic before watching that video, because I spoil things in it. So yeah, just again, I know I'm not giving you much to go off of, but if you're a horror fan at all, you should definitely read this. If you're looking for a good horror comic, this is fantastically done. It's really good, and it's done by Scott Snyder and Jock. So that's basically all I need to do to sell you guys on this. It's just, I know I'm not describing anything very much, but I can't really do anything without spoiling stuff. Just read it. There's creepy stuff in it. It's really good. The Fade Out is one of my favorite indie books I've ever read. It's a really good series. It's one of the few indie series I actually have every volume of. There's only 3 volumes. It's really good. It's done by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, one of my favorite indie creative teams, who's also doing another indie comic that I've talked about before. But yeah, it's a mystery sort of thriller that takes place in the 1950s or 40s, so around that era. So you got like Bob Hope and people like that, and it's in that industry. It's in the film industry back then, like the 50s, and someone gets murdered at the beginning of it, and the main character was there when it happened, but he was just messed up and he was out during it, and so he's trying to figure out what went on during all of that, and he sort of had a romantic thing going on with the girl that was murdered, and you're trying to figure out the whole time what's going on. Did he maybe do it? Probably not. But then he's got all these relationships that are falling apart, and also he's a writer in Hollywood, and he's sort of not the greatest writer. He used to be a good writer, but then there are things like the fact that he's not a good writer anymore, and he just has someone else write for him, but he uses his name to get big projects while someone else is writing for him, and they're sort of a writing team. And yeah, it's a really good book. Great mystery book that takes place in the 1950s movie era, where you get to see a lot of behind the scenes of that industry, and you even get to see some famous people in there. So yeah, it's just really good. On to Black Hammer, which I've talked about recently. It's a fantastic book. It's really good. It's done by Jeff Lemire, and the concept is you have these superheroes that were a part of this other world, and then they get transported to our world, and now they kind of have to live with just normal stuff, because, you know, in our world there's not supervillains attacking and people getting slaughtered and like buildings falling over all the time. That stuff doesn't happen very often like it does in comics, where it happens just every other week. So these superheroes are kind of adjusting to normal life. You also have this girl who's akin to Shazam. She's very much like him, where, you know, Shazam, he's a little boy, then he shouts Shazam, and lightning strikes him from the wizard Shazam, and then he gets turned into Captain Marvel, but, you know, now he's called Shazam. To where this girl, she's a grown woman. When she shouts her version of Shazam, she gets turned into a little girl, but she gets superpowers. So it's the same thing as Shazam, except she gets turned into a little girl. So what happened was, they were on their world, they were fighting their version of the Anti-Monitor. A lot of stuff happened. They get transported to our world, and she was a little girl when that happened. So now she's stuck in the body of a little girl, because her magic word does not work when she's on our planet, and she's not happy about it. And you have one guy, Abraham, who's pretty much the only person that's kind of adjusted to this realm, and he's the only one that's kind of like, yeah, I like being on Earth, I like this planet and stuff, like, this is cool, I like being on this Earth, and everyone else is just like, I want to go home. And it's just really good. There's a lot of different takes on superheroes. There's a Martian Manhunter-esque character, there's a Captain America-esque character, there's, like I talked about, a Captain Marvel type character, well, Shazam, and it's just, yeah, it's one of the best indie comics going on right now. I have volume 1 because volume 2 isn't out right now, but when it does come out, I'm definitely going to pick it up, and it's really good. Lastly, we have Kill or Be Killed, which I've talked about a lot before as well. Another book done by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. I've talked about this before. The premise is what should sell you. If you're not sold off the premise, don't buy it. The premise is, this guy is down on his luck. He doesn't like his life. He tries to kill himself, but he ends up surviving. Then later that night, he gets a visit from a demon who's like, hey, you tried to throw away a life. For that life you try to throw away, you have to kill someone once every month like rent, because I saved you. I made sure you didn't die. You tried to throw away your life. So now I'm going to need payment for that life. every month you have to kill one person, make it some scumbag, kill some bad person. But yeah, that's what you gotta do, and that's what the demon tells him. So this guy, who's just a normal guy that wanted to kill himself, now has to go and kill one person every month for this demon, like it's a month's rent, in order to, otherwise a lot of bad things will happen to him. And that's the premise, and it's really good because you've got this normal guy that's sort of going crazy and trying to live a normal life while also trying to plan on how to kill someone every month. And so it's just a really interesting premise and a good concept, and it's got, I think maybe the first 2 volumes are out right now. I only have the first volume. I need to pick up the second, but it's really good and it's ongoing right now, and just, yeah, I love it. So anyways, please let me know in the comments below, what are some of your favorite indie comics going around right now? I wanted to hear some of your guys' suggestions. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to continue the conversation, linked in the description down below. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, maybe subscribe. But anyways, I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, I grew up with the prenup. Mama said keep my C up. Now noticing I'm getting caught cracker and getting beat up, but I stayed up long nights, working hard on my craft. Gave a fuck about the bullies or anyone in my path.